If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
Well, I committed the cardinal sin today. Can't believe I did it. And hello, Darren. Yeah, the cardinal sin is okay. I kind of have a little excuse, but the point is that I actually couldn't find this Animation Truman Show animation. Okay, it's a cardinal sin because I did the most amateurish thing, which is I originally created this on my laptop, saved it to my web server, which is of course available from all the computers on the network. It's kind of a central repository. And I, for the last week or so, I've been just pulling it up off the recent list. And I've been doing so much work in Krita fixing up shots on this show that it was no longer in the list. And I'm like, I just don't even remember where I stuck the darn thing. Well, there you go. And so now the words are, this is not right. This is the even worse than normal version of the Animation Truman Show jingle / animation, whatever. This is even worse than normal. It's sloppy as can be, but now it's even sloppier because I had to reproduce the the glow. You can't even call it a glow. Oh, this is so bad. I just need to save my work, and I deserve to be spanked in a big way. Hey, Maria. Okay, so Darren is here. He's not going to be staying long because in England it's like 1 in the morning or something. It's like super late. So, but we were talking about a couple things that I did want to show you guys that are present in the regarding the My Paint brushes in the latest version of the Tahoma 2D nightly build. So this is actually the nightly build from, I believe, yesterday. Yeah, January 16th. So that would be, that would be yesterday. So this is about as new as it gets. I'm sure there's yet one more newer nightly build. But anyway, the topic had to do with My Paint brushes because I guess I think of it this way. The My Paint brushes that are present in OpenTunes and Tahoma are I've always thought of them as basically being baked into Tahoma. So the ability to customize or organize them has been, I wouldn't say it's not really possible, because if you customize a My Paint brush, like in other words, if you create a brush in a palette and then you customize the settings of that My Paint brush, and save the palette, then the settings are saved in the palette. So there's always been a way to sort of organize. But there's a couple things that are new here in the nightly builds of Tahoma 2D. And what was it now? Let's just go... okay, I'll just kind of do what I remember. And Darren, weigh into the comments if I'm missing something here. But number one would be, and of course I can look at the Discord chat as well, but if you right mouse click on these, there's some new options available, and I'll tell you, there's so many options that I'm not exactly sure which ones are actually new. But you've got this idea of copying or moving brushes to a style set, and then you have all these categories. Now, I don't remember seeing all that in the past. These are the same categories of My Paint brushes that are present in My Paint and other programs that tend to use My Paint brushes, the My Paint brush engine. So if you, what was it here? Yes, if you click this little icon right here, you can actually pick and choose which brushes, or collections of brushes you might say, even appear at all in Tahoma. And I assume, let's see, collapse all. Okay, so I don't, like I said, I don't know how much of this is new, but it is kind of cool if you're into it. So they've got these little plus icons so you can expand them out this way. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of new to me. So I'll do show all because that's, or I should say expand all. That's the normal state of affairs for me. So up until today, If I customize a My Paintbrush, what I do is I actually add it to a palette and then customize it, because if you were to customize this brush, for example, which is like an oil paint brush, and then you click over here on the same brush there, it's going to reset it to the default settings. That's the normal behavior. So anyway, does that pretty much sum it up, Darren? Now the other thing I did want to show is that if you go to the Darren T, let me make sure I don't want to show anything I'm not supposed to show here. So if you go on Discord, and if you're into this and you want to check it out, Darren T's Discord server has a channel called Downloads and Links, and he's done a really good job of making available all kinds of resources that are related to Tahoma and OpenTunes. And one of them, if we look down here, extra My Paint raster brushes, and if you click this link, it'll it'll help you. It'll give you a bunch of new brushes that you can explore and blah blah blah. So for a lot of people, that's kind of a cool thing. The question I had for Darren was, well, how do you actually install them? It's always been my understanding that if you were to download some My Paint brushes, you would have to copy them into a certain folder in the Tahoma installation. So you sort of have to do it the poor man's way. It's a way that works, but you sort of have to. In other words, you're not doing it from within the program, actually. Is that correct, Darren? Does that sound like that's pretty much the case? He says, I think add to favorites command is really useful to group your favorite brushes at the very top of the list. Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah, for me, honestly, there's hardly any of them. There's very few that I just come back to over and over. So for me, it'd be charcoal. There you go. Charcoal, pencil, oil paint. Sometimes I use the airbrush, but this is the other one I've been. So putting those at the top in a favorites list, definitely kind of useful. For me, probably not as useful as you might think, for the simple reason that this brush and this brush are both brushes that to actually use them, I would always customize them. So my sense here would be that if I really do want to customize, say, this brush, like I wouldn't mind changing the defaults on this brush so that the radius is, the radius would actually be 0.1, hardness would be, I went over this earlier today, but would be 0.5, and pixel feather would be 0.5. Okay, now what that just did was it changed this brush in my palette. It didn't change what's here. Okay, so my strong suspicion is if I click on one of these other brushes and then back to this one, I'll bet you it's going to reset, and it did. So so my question for you, Darren, as long as you're still up and if you're willing, where do those files go? Because I suspect that those are text files that I could open in a text editor, and I could actually change the default settings on these brushes if I wanted to. And I'm sure it's somewhere in the Tahoma folder. But if you could, I'm looking on my P drive right now, so I'm looking in my apps folder, my Tahoma 2D folder. Is it in the Tahoma stuff? I believe the brushes are stored in text files. You should be, because, I mean, the whole concept with My Paint brushes is that the developers of My Paint have, which is a good paint program, by the way, if you're looking for a quick and dirty paint program where you can cut and paste, layered paintings that you would make directly into Tahoma, just the same way I do with Krita. You can do that from My Paint too. My Paint's a solid program. But anyway, so there is, what the My Paint guys did was they took their brush engine and they saved it as what's called an external loadable library. So on Windows it would be a DLL. I suspect on Linux it's probably a .so file, but in any case, it's a single file that allows other developers to integrate the My Paint brush engine into their program, which you can now do it in obviously Tahoma and OpenTunes. You can do it in GIMP. I'm not sure. I got to double check this, but I'm pretty sure the Krita 5 that I've been using for the last month actually I'm pretty darn sure that my paintbrush engine is built into Krita 5 too. I just haven't bothered to mess with it and find out for sure. So can't remember off the top of your head. So anyway, the point of the story being that when an application has integrated the MyPaint engine, all it needs to do is provide a text file on your hard drive that lists the parameters of the brush. And that's all you're doing here when you edit the settings of the brush. You're just changing a list of parameters, and so they're all there. And if you save that, then wango bango, just like magic, you've got yourself a new brush. And the MyPaint brush engine is pretty capable. It's not perfect, and it's not the main deficiency compared to some brush engines, including Krita, would be I don't really think it has a good way of and let me qualify this. I actually think the latest version of the MyPaint brush engine does have this capability. But the basic idea would be to have a like a sequence of images. Maybe you got 3 images that change. So as you drag your mouse, it's actually toggling between multiple images, and so you get like an animated brush. I mean, that's kind of a thing. And so I don't think that the MyPaint brush engine does that. So I'm going to do a quick look here in the Tahoma 2D Tahoma stuff folder. And I'm seeing the palette stuff. And so you guys can't see what I'm looking at right now, but when I find it, if I find what I think I'm looking for, I'll let you guys know. Yep, there it is. Yep, I found it. Okay, so yeah, the location would appear to be, hello, computer, don't be silly. Sometimes things get a little clunky navigating when you actually have 3 screens. So for me, I've got Tahoma 2D installed in a subfolder of my P drive called apps. Okay, so that's just my convention. So all my apps, I keep them together so I have a relatively portable application scenario. Anyway, you got Tahoma 2D, and inside of Tahoma 2D, you've got Tahoma stuff, then library, and then my paintbrushes. So my suspicion is, what is this brush called? Let me mouse over it, and that's called liner. Liner. Okay, let's run with this. Let's see if we can make this happen. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's see here. Okay, this is definitely old. I'm going to close Tahoma. Well, wait, I don't want to close Tahoma because I want to see what these parameters are. I said it was radius, hardness, and pixel feather. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here, and we're going to just do a search for a file called liner. And there it is. Okay, so that might be... Okay, so there's a liner brush in both the DVAD and the, what is that, Mojo? Kind of hard to read. So let me just double check here. This is liner with a small L, so I'm going to assume since one of these is capital L and one of them small L that it's probably this one. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is open a text editor. Let's just see if this works. What the heck? If it works, it'll be great. Okay, now I got to be a little careful here. Okay. So now in my text editor in my other screen, yes, okay, here we go. So now I just opened this up, and here is the liner brush. Now if the settings are the same as what I think they're going to be, let me go back here. The settings we're interested in for this brush is radius, hardness, and pixel feather. Okay, so let's just do a search. No, let's do Control F, and let's look for radius. And I'm going to assume that probably the parameters are in the same order. Okay, dabs per basic radius. I'm not 100% sure that the Not sure that the parameters in this what looks like JSON format. Well, yeah, I think that is actually JSON format is what they're using for the brush definitions. So we've got a parameter here that's just called radius, and here in the list it comes after opacity linearize. So just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to look up the term linearize. And it does not look to me like the parameters in here match in terms of their ordering the the list of parameters in Tahoma. So that makes it a little more complicated, because that means I got to sit here and search for the radius. It looks like the description, this probably is the correct brush, because this is called a small brush to trace regular lines. So it seems like a brush you would use for ink. So settings. Well, I guess we'll look for the value. So the value here is 0.8. Okay, so let's look for 0.8. Slowness. Nope, that's not what we want. And by the way, and actually, let me tell you guys this. This is something you may really want to know. If you've ever wondered how you get smoothing on a brush, because that was another thing I actually changed in my palette for this brush. If you want to know how you get smoothing, let me find it here. Slow position tracking. If you take slow position tracking and turn it up to about 10 probably, you're going to find that that's a really, really nice smoothing algorithm. It doesn't actually slow down your brush work too much, which a smoothing algorithm often does. It's not too bad. You put it at about 10, and it just gives you the ability to control those lines and get nice smooth curves that are a little more controllable. So slow position tracking is the parameter you want for that. Anyway, I said we're going to look for 0.8. So hardness is not what we want. And 0.8 is only coming up in 2 places, so that leads me to believe maybe I've got the wrong brush here. So let's try this one. And if this turns into a dead end, well, it's called liner, so that's probably a pretty good guess too. So 0.8 hardness. Did I change that? I'll just like everything else, I'll blame this on dyslexia. Yeah. Hardness and pixel feather. So actually it's radius, hardness, and pixel feather. So I want to change hardness to 0.5. You know what? I probably shouldn't do this, because I could be changing the wrong brush. I'm going to put myself in a pickle here if I'm not careful. So rather than keeping going, on the track I'm on, I think I'm going to pause and say, well, maybe this isn't the greatest idea. However, anyway, importantly, if you want a good brush for inking, use the liner and change the settings. This is what worked for me. The radius was actually 0.1, hardness 0.5, pixel feather 0.5, and then the gotta find it again. Slow position tracking, set it to 10. And that's a very nice inking brush. So anyway, I hope that helped you guys a little bit. Now, I want to say there was, I better look at the comments. Can you remember off the top of my head, you're in the right area? Yeah, it is in the stuff folder, and I got the location right. But when you've got 2 brushes that both have the same name, you are definitely kind of asking for trouble. The brushes are in the folder that's listed in the raster brush list, so you can check which file the brush is in. Okay. Before I go any further, though, there was another question that somebody asked on. I have an old video on character rigging and whatnot in OpenTunes. It's got like 20,000 views, so it's been a lot of people seem to watch this video. Somebody had a question about linking up with the plastic tool when you're trying to pipe multiple levels through the plastic tool. The reason you would want to do that would be you've used the plastic tool to deform a character, so you can do some secondary animation or whatever, turn of the head, whatever. Well, the normal case is that you're going to want to distort that character, but if you have a separate layer for shadows, for example, or maybe their mouth is in a separate layer than their face, which is the case you have here, then you would want to take all of those different layers and pipe them through the plastic tool so that they're all being kept together as the character deforms. Well, the problem comes when you've got a level that you actually want to parent just to one of the nodes in the plastic tool. So if you wonder what the heck I'm talking about, let's just take a look here. Let's go with Balder. Looks to me like Balder got he's column 3. Let me just see what we have here. Yeah, so this is actually parented to column 2, which I'm not going to explain right now, because the fact that this plastic tool level is parented to another level kind of complicates things. But anyway, let me show you what we got here. Let's go down here. Boom. Okay, plastic tool, and I'm going to hit the X key. And the problem that this person had with the question that they had was they were trying to figure out how to take another level and not have it deformed by the plastic tool, but rather just have the entire level linked to a single node. Okay? So I'm not going to actually get into a lot of details about explaining how that works. The important thing to know is that if you parent a level to a plastic tool, not a bone, but I call it a node. I call this, the long part the bone, and I call this part the node. They call it a vertex, I guess. If you parent a level to the vertex, then when you say rotate this bone or something, like that, the linked layer will not rotate. It'll just move. So if I go like this, a linked layer would just move to the left. It wouldn't actually rotate like this bone. Now there's a way to make it work so that it does kind of, sort of, but it's a completely different technique. But the problem this person had was, if you look here, there's no indication of, like, this is vertex number 5, and this person was like totally mystified because all there is a red dot. Well, the secret is right here, down here in the lower right hand corner. You just click this icon and it switches the whole interface from being a simple singular connector to this more complex connector that actually shows you different channels. And that is what allows you to take an entire level and actually parent it to just a single bone. If I run this, I'm really going to booger up this scene, but if I were actually to pipe this into this channel, then another channel appears. Every time I add one, every time I plug into one that doesn't have something currently plugged into it, a new one appears, so that ostensibly you could have all kinds of layers that are just linked to the individual nodes in a skeleton, which kind of suggests that you really don't have to use the plastic tool to deform stuff at all if you don't want to. You could create a skeleton and just use it for, moving things around. The way I used that in the past was, for example, if you wanted control over this guy's head so you can maybe rotate it, but you didn't want to deform it at all, what you do, actually, it's kind of non-intuitive, but what you would do is you'd go into the painting like this, and you'd actually chop his head off, so that when the plastic tool generates the mesh, you actually have two completely separated pieces. And then you can use the skeleton on frame 1 to just move them back together again, and then you've got a whole different way to, ostensibly to deform your character or animate it. So anyway, that's a obscure thing that not a lot of people are going to need to use, but because it did come up in a question just today, I figured I'd catch it and try to answer it as best I can. So hopefully that person will maybe tune in and see the answer. So again, if you want new My Paint brushes and whatnot, go to Darren T's Discord channel in the downloads and links. I'm sorry, his Discord server. We want to use the correct nomenclature. And go to the downloads and links channel on his Discord server. Okay? Okay. So that's a lot of information in a short time. And oh my gosh, I've been going for 38 minutes. How do you go for 38 minutes and not actually get anything done? I don't know. Looks like that's what I've done, though. But I did want to cover those things, and so now, since I'm live and I'm doing this, I am curious. We've got Maria here. Hopefully Darren's gone to bed, because, boy, I tell you, in England, it's really too late to be up right now. So who else is here? Please say hello. Identify yourselves while I take a sip of my tasty beverage. Meanwhile, I'm going to jump over to the show, and I got to tell you guys, I have been... You know what? 2022 is going to be a crazy year. I've been telling you guys as I've been, I've mentioned the fact that on my live streams and videos, I updated the description to make people aware of things like my Patreon and things like that. And I'd mentioned a GoFundMe campaign that I really haven't promoted at all, and I'm sure nobody's contributed anything yet. But kind of the rationale behind the whole thing is that, I really can only give an hour or two to this show per day on average, and I'm gonna tell you, I ain't lying, because the commercial side of my business is just starting to explode this year. Just a lot of clients that. Just a lot of stuff related to media and marketing, and kind of almost I seem to be increasingly serving kind of a consultation function as business people struggle with for a small business, so that's any business smaller than $1 million a year, let's say, they really don't have time. They're usually too busy running the business to really bone up on like technology and like what are they going to do? Hop on Wix and create their own website? I mean, obviously they could. Anybody can, but hey, Tiny Salad. So somebody else is here. It says there's 4 people, but only 3 have announced themselves. So anyway, but the good news is I was shocked. I guess I mentioned this in the session earlier today that I was going through and correcting all these shots and realized I was at the end of the sequence. So I'm like, wow, that's ridiculous. And so I went through this morning and just did a little bit of characterization fixes here, which I'm quite happy with. And, it's kind of like I'm getting scary close to the point where I can start doing voices and music on this next episode. I'm kind of like tripping myself out here because I really didn't realize I had gotten as much done as I have. But so now I'm just scanning through to see what else needs to be fixed. One of the worst shots in the whole sequence was this one. Well, no, it wasn't this one. This one I actually changed Tianara's characterization. It's much nicer. And by the way, this shot, yeah, we got to do a push on this. So as long as I'm here and thinking about it, I'm going to take this. I'm just going to push that in a little bit. We definitely need to do a push on that shot. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's much better. It might be a little strong. Let me pull that back just a little bit. That was a bit aggressive. So these are things that are just going on all the time, just little tweaks, little changes, little improvements. So this shot, is this the one? Yeah, that's the old one. Yeah, that's the one that I sort of built on. So that shot was fine. That shot's fine. I think this is the one I redid off. Yep. So she says, yeah, I completely changed her mother to, I love the characterization way better. I've heard enough. Baldur, I love the way she just is staring straight at Tianara. So it's not really overacted. It's actually very understated. And you just see this. It's just like, wow, that witchy woman, I've heard enough. Baldur. Yes, ma'am. Take Tianara to the wagons. Yes, ma'am. I
I'll tell you, Baldur, actually, this really needs to be the voice I give him. I want him to be a low, scratchy Cockney. I think that's the voice that this man ought to have. Now, I reserve the right. I do reserve the right later on in the show. Perhaps episode, I don't know, 7 or 8, something like that. I reserve the right to have Baldur turn from ostensibly a bad guy to ostensibly a good guy. I'd like to see him flip. So we'll see what happens with this man. But at this point, he's the minion of Carliana. The minion of Carliana.
And so he talks like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Take Tianara to the wagons.
Yes, ma'am.
I love that. Okay, so then Luka's like, it's a little harsh. And then this is the shot we just did a couple days ago. Feeling good, monkey. I think we actually need a push there too. I think this entire sequence, same thing. Just a little bit. Just a little tiny push. Just a little bit of life. And I think I'm going to move this one north just a little bit so it stays framed well. But I think that'll make... The whole thing just needs a little bit of energy to it. It's so subtle you can barely even tell. But I definitely think that helps a bit. Just a little bit of... Yeah, that's good. A little bit of motion. Huh. That'll work. Okay, so he flips and crashes and smashes and... Okay, Baldur. Mike Mazurki. I don't know who Mike Mazurki is. Never heard of Mike Mazurki. Who's Mike Mazurki?
Says my name's not Mike Mazurki, my name's Baldur. So you better call me by my proper name, or I might have my way with you. And you know what that means, don't you? Yeah, you know what that means. Don't like that a bit when people call me Mike Mazurki. My name's Baldur. Baldur.
Well, is it Baldur or is it Baldur? I'm not really clear on this. I think you're confusing us, sir. Because you said Baldur, but then you said Baldur. Could you clarify?
Why, I've got to take a drink of my tasty beverage. I'll answer that question when I bloody well want to.
Big, tall, rough actor who made a career of playing the not-too-bright muscle in comedies and crime dramas. Okay. Take your word for it. Take your word for it. Okay, so this is so... I think this shot I fixed up as well, actually. Was it this one? No. I mean, this is all just so silly that I think we're okay to leave it kind of simple and silly. You know what I'm saying? We're going to have a lot of music going on or whatever. And okay, so the one thing I do think I want to fix, though, is I would like to just defocus the background a little bit. So this is 1:30. Let's go to town, baby. This shot is not going to be... We're not going to quit anyway. We're not going to save our changes there. All right, we'll get rid of that. And now, let me just take a moment and make sure all my work from this afternoon is saved. Because, like I said, I've just been screaming through these shots. This shot, by the way, this was quite an interesting shot because I needed to do some clever color correction. What I needed to do was get the contrast on the outlines up. Oh, I'm sorry, really I should say down. I needed to raise the lightness of the ink lines and at the same time color correct the characters. So what I did, this is just a filter mask that's applied to it, and by the way, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to change my brush from that obnoxious airbrush. So if you add a filter mask, you can then hit F3, and at any time you can edit that filter mask and change the settings. So I think what I did was I went to the lightness channel, and I raised it up. So the mindset was that we're going to raise the low. See that? See how that lightens my outlines? About 25%. But then in order to preserve the rest of the color, basically you would want everything else to be kind of a straight line right through the center here, diagonally speaking. So then I was like, okay, so now what we'll do is we'll just crunch that down and sort of dial it into shape. By scooping down the mid-range, we kind of preserve that contrast. So there you go. There you go. Now I'm not going to save that because I like the way it was set before, and I know I saved my work. So we're going to shot number 130, scenes, and this would be, since I'm really sure this is a Krita file. Yep, I think so. Let's see what we've got here. Okay. All right. So yeah, we definitely were going for the sort of cheeseball, cartoony vibe at the time I did this one. Well, this is an interesting state of affairs that really points up an opportunity to take advantage of some of the new tools in Krita 5. Why? Well, because actually at the time this shot was originally done, I had to manually keyframe this background moving. Bloom. Bloom. Well, you know what? That's kind of stupid. Let's not do that. Let's just... Yep. What we'll do is we'll just take this, kill all these frames. We don't need them. And then we will come over here to the BG background 2, and we will add a transform mask. And then what we'll do is we'll go to this spot right here and add a keyframe. And then that spot right there and add a keyframe. Then all we have to do, and since I'm dyslexic, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm actually going to move it in the wrong direction, I'm quite sure. He's moving up. This is like brutally difficult for me. This is brutally difficult. I am really sure I'm going to get this wrong. I am just completely worthless when it comes to having to think in reverse. No, I got it right. Okay, cool. So now the caveat would be that actually, I would say the timing doesn't quite feel right. So I'm going to just... Oh, no, Krita, don't be stupid. I want to tell you, one definite warning with Krita 5 is when you're working in the timeline, the animation timeline, and you're grabbing keyframes or whatever, you could think of it this way. You would expect the software to kind of guess what you intend. Like, in other words, if I just click on one frame, you would think I'm trying to just select that one frame, for example. Whereas if I hit Shift and click, that I'd be selecting a group of them, right? Obviously, you guys know that. Krita 5 is a bit notorious for guessing wrong. And it's often the case that you have to click twice. Like right there. See what just happened? This frame was selected, then I clicked this frame, and what Krita said is, oh, you had clicked this frame a moment ago, and then you click this one. You must want to select the entire range of frames. That must be what you want to do. Well, unfortunately, in Krita 5, that's a bit of residue of what we've seen in Krita for the last several years. The developers pretty much always guess wrong at first. Like, they'll fix it eventually. I'm sure there's going to probably be some improvements, but that is completely the wrong guess, and it's always the wrong guess. It's never correct. I've never had a situation where I grab a frame, and then without hitting Shift, I grab another frame, and the right answer is to select the whole range. So, bad news for you if you're into Krita 5 is that that's all over the place in Krita 5. Like right there, it's another thing, by the way. It's kind of a bummer. I don't mean to be Mr. Complainer tonight, but it used to be that if I clicked here in the timeline on frame number 1, that the playhead would go to frame 1 as well. And think of it as, that's where I want to be. Krita 5 assumes that it's not where you want to be, it's where you want to edit. It's where you want to change something, but it's not actually where you want to be in the timeline. So for me, there may be a way in the preferences to change that, but the bad news is Krita is a little inconsistent. If I click in a layer and then drag, as you can see, the playhead moves. that could be good or could be bad. It is, for me, it's good. That's what you would expect. But what you've really kind of done there is combined two functions in that you not only drag the playhead, but you also effectively, by clicking and dragging, you also created a selection, which means it's now going to loop on those frames. So I don't have all the answers, but with Krita 5, the general rule would be if you want to navigate your timeline, click up here up top, the way you would in Hit Film Express, or actually in Blender 2.9 is the same way. Whereas it used to be you could click anywhere here to navigate around. It's a little hit and miss. You know, it's a little hit and miss. Because now it seems to be working, and that's one of the things that's kind of vexing about it, is it's a bit inconsistent. I click here and it does jump to frame 1. But you guys saw it just a moment ago. I did the same thing. I was on this frame and I clicked over here and it didn't jump. So it's like, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to jump for me or not? So I better save my work. Couple things I want to think about here. I do feel that Mel's eyes probably should be higher on his head. Okay, so let's think about this. What we see, it does look like I did some liquefy on his hair. So in other words, there's some squash and stretch going on. And it also looks like there's an overlay that is... Zuko's over there saying, night-night. It looks like there's an overlay that's tinting the hair towards the top. I'll bet you that's this. This is probably... I don't know. I mean, it's a vignette, but it doesn't actually seem to be affecting his hair. So, hey, Nagut. Okay, so my point, friends, my point. When he reaches the top of his motion here, what we could do is we could actually do the same thing on Mel. We could get rid of all those frames, go to the beginning. Is Mel in a group here? So this is called, you know, quite stupidly, this is called Paint Layer 1. Okay, that's a enormously bad idea there, Dave. You really want to call that Mel. Okay, so what's Paint Layer? Okay, so this is just a color correction. So let's call this color correction. I guess we'll be a bit verbose today. Yeah, well, which is understandable because he was pretty light colored. So what we're going to do here is take this frame and move it back to here, right? Then what we'll do is add the transform mask so that on this frame he's landed in his destination, or at his destination, and we put a key here, hit the A key, and just pop that down. Okay, so now what we can do is we can add a little bit of a bounce. Pop. So here, we'll let him land. Okay, let's see how it feels. Not bad. Okay, so the reason I did that, let me think about this for half a second. I had mentioned this morning that with the transform masks in Krita 5, you have a choice. You can either keyframe animate them, or you can use them as a deformation or a translation that prevails over an entire animated sequence. Point being, the second method, that's when you can use like liquefy. Okay, so my point being, I'm going to add another transform mask, so stay with me here and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to add a transform mask, and I am going to put it in liquefy mode. Let's see, let's go to the last frame right here. Okay, and I'm going to put it in liquefy mode so that I can raise his eyes up just a little bit. Okay, so that's why I'm doing it, is so I can just move his eyes up. I better get my stylus. Just take my time. Be a little bit careful. Okay, so now that distortion is going to be applied to every single frame. So now in this case, it's actually a weird case because so now we have to wait for Krita to calculate it. Okay, so you can see if we turn this off, look at the difference. Okay, so now it's got to calculate it again. So this is a bit of a slow process unless you really know what you're doing and you're sure you got the result you were looking for. Now what's going to happen is that distortion of his eyes is actually going to be applied to every single frame. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this transform mask and actually apply it up here to this layer just to get it out of the way. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Mel. If you want to play it safe, actually, if you really wanted to be careful, what you would do is you would take Mel with his transform mask, hit Control G, put it in a group, okay? Stay with me here, folks. Then you'd copy the group so that now you've got a backup copy of it. So if you need to get back to the original art, you can. And then take this copy and merge the group. So that'll flatten it out and it'll apply that distortion to the whole sequence. And that worked fine. Now what we can do is take the transform mask, bring it back into the group, and turn it on. And now we get our animation back. Ta-da! Cool beans. Now I'm gonna actually take a break here for just a second. So I'm gonna put this in full screen mode. And I'm going to be back in 2 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is let's just watch this move. Yeah, when I come back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use liquify on the individual frames to go ahead and give him a little bit of bounce in his hair, because I think that would look good. So I'll be back in just a couple minutes. I'm back. Okay, so one question someone might ask, I suppose, if they were curious, is why I seem to be anchored so much in Krita right now, since I've really been favoring Tahoma lately. And the reason is really just that so many of these legacy shots were originally done in Krita, and it's been quite nice, actually, to be able to bring them into Krita 5. And one of the big things is to be able to set the render settings so that it always renders to the same location, because this gets saved in the Krita file now. It didn't used to. It was maddening because you had to change it. You had to do all this every time you opened an old file. And if you weren't careful, you'd wind up rendering into whatever was the last shot that you were working on, which was a royal pain. So this is 130. So I'm looking to make sure it's ping files. Back when I was doing a lot of this work in Krita, I tended to save them as pings, and later I sort of switched to JPEGs because I just didn't see that there was like a quality problem with JPEGs, and they are smaller files and blah blah blah. But okay, so for the record, you can just type this in too. You don't have to browse to the file location. That'll do the trick. So now this is actually going to go ahead and re-render, and you can see it's complaining because I'm overwriting the old version of the file. So I'll go ahead and let it render. The reason being that once I've set the render settings, if I don't go ahead and render it, but just close the dialog, it won't remember what I put in there. So I do have to actually render it. So no big deal. So now I'm going to show you how you would use Liquify to get a little bounce on his hair. So there he goes up. So he actually goes up on frame 8. So now the reason I want to remember that is I'm going to turn the transform mask off. So that means that with that turned off, now he doesn't move. That doesn't matter. That's fine. Now I just want to go to frame 8, and I'm going to edit this frame. Now, remember, his hair has to return to where it was before, right? So therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the current cell and actually just make a copy of it. So I'm going to change this one, and if I screw it up, I'll just delete that frame, and I've always got the previous version of it right there anyway. Okay? So having done that, and I can change the name of this to Mel again. Okay? Now we can take our Liquify and give his hair a little bounce. Just a little bounce. And so he's not going to move, but boop. Boop. Okay, so now there's one thing I'm wondering here. This appears to be a bug. Actually, I'm seeing, I may be seeing multiple bugs here, actually. This is a little bit scary. Let's stop everything and look at what we're seeing here. Over here in the layers, if we look closely, there is only one. Okay, I see what's going on. We've got the hidden group. Okay, yeah, this is strange. Okay, so we've got a hidden group that was the copy of it we made before we changed, before we applied the transform mask to distort Mel. Okay? So now, having said that, what we see here, what's strange about it, and maybe I'm misinterpreting the interface here a little bit, but the change I just made, I think, actually, this is really difficult to explain, so I hope you guys can follow it. Here's what just happened. I copied the cell from this hidden copy where the word Mel is not capitalized. Okay? But over here, I'm not sure why this, I think this is not pinned. I think what this icon does is pin it to the timeline. So I want to pin that to the timeline. That's what I was looking at, and I was getting confused between this and this. Because I'm like, why is that? Appears to be turned off, but yet that's the one we're seeing. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. So what I did right just now was totally wrong. And since this group, I know this is probably so confusing. Since this group is hidden and this is just the backup copy, it really does not make sense to have it pinned to the timeline because we're not really using it in the timeline. Okay, so sorry about that stupid mistake. Let me check one more thing here. Okay, so this frame is an eye blink. So what I want to do is make the copy here, and now let's do that again. So I hope you could follow that because that was definitely a little confusing. Okay, so now the other thing we could do is when we turn the transform mask back on, you can see that he's moving up right through here. So it probably makes sense to go back to the first frame and squish his hair down a little bit because he's moving up, right? So the hair would compress a little bit. But just to be safe, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and copy that first frame and just make the change here. And we'll splay it out a little bit. So we'll squish it down and splay it out like that. Okay, and I'll leave this one here because we actually never see that. Because once we turn the animation on, he's off screen anyway. So now what should happen is his hair is sort of squished down until it bounces up here and then comes back down. Okay, let's see how it worked, friends. Not bad. Not bad. One thing I think I would like is I think it would be this is getting into some subtlety here, but I think the comedy of it would be a little better enhanced if the blink came later. No, that didn't work. But I'm kind of back to where I was a minute ago, where I'm a little weirded out by the fact that it appears to me I pushed his hair up there. Okay, his body came down. Oh, I see. Okay, all right, this is my fault. I had some manual animation. This needs to come down even more. We kind of need to match this, and that doesn't quite work, does it? Okay, so there is a fix for that. We really need to match this hair. So here's how we do it. All right, not a big deal. Hit the G key and put it in erase mode. So I'm going to hit the G key for the freehand path tool in erase mode. So the E key to erase. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the top of his hair so that I can then go to this cell, make a selection, and just grab everything from here up. Control C. And then I should be able to come back to this cell and go edit, paste into active layer. Okay, that should have fixed it. Let's find out. Okay, yeah. And so now what we can do is what I was going to do a moment ago, which is just push the blink downstream a little bit. All right? So boom, go. Okay. Now, another thing that's kind of bugging me. Oh boy, this is one of those judgment calls. You can see a little bit of funkiness with his eyebrows. So let's turn this off. And here's what we're going to do. Guys, this gets hairier and hairier, doesn't it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a correction layer. So this is we'll call this skin correction. Seems like a bit much, but the thing is, if I get it right, we can always bake it into the mel layer. Okay, so what are we doing here? Well, I'm going right in here. I'm just going to take my brush, B key. Let's turn off the color correction layer here. It's a subtle change, but you want to make sure your colors are right. If you have any color correction layers, then when you sample colors like this, you're not actually getting the correct color. So ostensibly it could sample a color that's actually a little bit too dark, and then when you turn the color correction back on, you see the problem because it gets a little bit even darker. So it's basically getting color corrected twice. So you want to turn any color corrections off, and you can hear Zuko over there in the background. Okay, and it's actually doing the same thing. Oh yeah, we got to turn that one off too. You see, there it just happened. Okay, so let's take this. And then we'll just paint back into that. And now, because the transformation where he stands up is separate from the drawings, this correction can prevail over the entire sequence. And right there, let me see. I'm going to say, not quite sure why that's reappearing there. Oh, I see, because the original art had this change. Okay. So, let's just keep going. Kind of give him sort of sad eyes or whatever. And unfortunately, what I need to do is repaint over this. This is some pretty subtle correction work going on. Zuko's complaining over there because he knows it's getting to be time for him to go to bed. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me see if there's any. Oh my gosh. This is, frankly, this is one of those dyslexia things. I mean, literally, I'm seeing the problem and having a hard time ferreting out why it's happening because I have to put everything in reverse in my mind in order to make this make sense. Basically, this is what needs to happen is through this whole region here, I actually have to recolor in the skin color because it's not covering up the issues that were there before. So, and look at that, it's still going to be wrong. So I got a little bit strange. Probably, I expect probably kind of hard to follow what's going on there, but there's one more thing I think I'll add while I'm here, which is to go, let's just get a little bit of a outline color. Okay, let's give that a crack and see if that feels pretty good. Oh, darn it. Okay. Okie dokie. So now I got to go into erase mode. See, I accidentally covered up a little bit of his eye. I am such a silly goose. Okay, we're in good shape now. Okay, and then better save our work. So now if we turn the transform mask back on and the color corrected layers, we should one of the true deficiencies, I feel like I'm complaining like crazy tonight, but one of the big deficiencies in Creative 5 is there is no rewind button. Okay, for 2 years I hit the W key to rewind, and without getting into a big discussion of why, actually replacing the stupid rewind button, return to 0. I tried it 2 days ago, and the hotkey situation sort of got confused, and like I said, I'm not going to try to completely explain why it happened, but grr. So that means I have to click just to rewind. You know, it's pretty stupid, but there it is. Okay, now what I'm going to do is turn off these and this so I can just deal with my background. So the background's a little bit cartoony, obviously. So let's make a decision here what we want to do. I actually think I'm just gonna, I think for now I'm just gonna give it a really, really small blur. 17 is too much. Let's just go way down. Yep, just a little bit. And let's just do it not as multi-frame, but let's just do it as a filter mask. So now the animation and the filter mask are both being added to the background. And if we turn everything on, we should be able to re-render the shot and basically be done with it. So Control R. There we go. Alright, I think we're doing okay here. So, what's going on over there? We can talk about him now. Absolutely, you guys can talk about me anytime you want. You can say all kinds of things about me. I seriously don't mind. It's more important to me that people feel comfortable to tell the truth. 6 concurrent viewers. Holy smokes. Well, let's go back to the show and see what we've got. So we got all the bowls breaking, and then shoo. Okay, so one thing I would like to do over here in the editor is I'm going to split this. Hit the S key to split that, and I'm going to hit Control, and I'm actually going to try to punch up the speed on this. Yeah, and see that really punctuates the putting the blink later definitely helped. Okay, so let me check one setting here. Yeah, no resampling going on. So yeah, that just sped up the pop. Okay, now that's interesting. Let me check something here. 1.5. So this, I did not realize this. We've actually got this whole sequence. The beginning of it we had stretched out before. So we need to see how this is going to work. Let me just go. Okay, so what is wrong here? Well, when I go back to Krita, we don't see Mel. Do we? Okay, so let's go to frame 1, 0. So he's not there. But when we go back to the editor, on literally the first frame, there he is. That's kind of weird. That's what we needed right there. Okay. Phew. I like it. I like it. It feels pretty good now. Okay, now this bit here, I'm not sure. This does not belong in there. Let's get rid of it. Okay, not bad. Kind of feel like maybe if we have some frames where we can extend this a little bit, we do, so that's good. I feel like I want to extend that sort of awkward moment a little longer. Boop. Yeah, that feels good. That felt about right. So, always thinking like an editor. Okay, so now the color correct. Ah, I see what this is. Let me see. Well, I thought I knew what it was, but I guess I don't. Let's go to this shot. What the heck is... Oh, I see. I punched up the saturation. But here... You know what? That's stupid. We shouldn't be doing that. That's wrong. That is wrong, my friends. So here's what we're going to do. I can see the problem. I am going to add, well, let's just hit Control M. So on the whole group, the whole Mel group, and by the way, I'm happy with the animation, so I'm going to just delete this extra group. I don't need to keep the backup around anymore. I'm feeling confident. So, Control M to do a color correction. Well, yeah, that doesn't really punch up the saturation like we might hope. But I do wonder, Okay, so there's kind of a rule. Let me turn the transform mask back off again. Okay, so one of the rules is if you can solve a problem with a layer operation as opposed to a filter, you're usually better off to do it. It's going to be more performant and to some degree more controllable. So what I'm going to do is actually add another layer here. And let me hit the G key, and I think what I'll do is just, this is just going to be white, but what I'm going to do is just do a rough shape on all the skin tone. Okay? So now we could, yeah, of course I didn't get it all the way. You'll see what's going to happen here in half a second. Okay, so now what I'm also going to do is take that selection right there. And by the way, of course I could have used the magic wand or something like that, you know. Okay, and we're just going to punch it up with a little bit of blur so it just blends in better. And then I'm going to put this in saturation mode. Okay, so now you can see what that did. Let's see. I should use black instead of white. No big deal. Just hit Control M, and let's just start cranking this down. Seriously, dude? Okay. Let's do lightness then. Fine. Seriously, dude? Oh, this is when I actually start getting confused by the. Okay. It's not, the saturation layer is not doing what I thought it would, so it's actually not doing anything wrong. Friends, we are going to have to do a curves operation. So, get over it. We're going to do a multi-frame curves operation. So, no big deal. Control M. We're going to do multi-frame. Now, what I got to do is punch up the saturation just of his skin. Now, one thing that you get in, say, GIMP that you don't get in Krita is the ability to use an eyedropper here. Like when you're using the curves tool, it'd be nice if you could do an eyedropper here, and it would show you kind of like with maybe with a histogram as well, but show you where you've selected. In Krita, you have to guess. So I'm going to punch up this saturation, and that pretty well did the trick. Now you could argue that maybe down below here, this is definitely a little tricky. Oh boy. Well, I'm gonna say reset. Okay, stop everything. We can't do it that way because we need to apply this to everything, not just to Mel. Why? Because we have the skin correction in there. With the skin correction in there, we're going to correct everything, and then the little patch that I just made a few minutes ago will not show up. It'll still be the previous color, and then it'll stand out like a sore thumb, so that's not going to work. So I would say that'll do the trick. Feels pretty good. The only reason I was fiddling with it is because the shadow area under his neck is kind of maybe a little overly saturated. But we could compensate for that if we really want to. I just don't think that's that big of a problem. So, let's just let this play and see if it's feeling pretty good. Okay, so now we got to turn the transform mask back on, obviously. And what the heck is this paint layer? Oh boy. See, this is where you're getting into the point where by having several operations that are all having to be calculated all the time, and it's the reason why doing color adjustments is usually a bit punitive. Okay, yes, that was the layer that right, duh. This can be deleted. We're not using that, are we? Because we wound up doing the color adjustment. So, forgive my silliness, but I think I got it. So I appreciate Nagut's sarcasm, because he's not so far from the truth that it's like, yeah, is Dave ever going to get this shot right? Is he ever? Will he or won't he? Well, let's find out. Let's go ahead and render this out, and then we'll jump back over to the show. And while it's rendering, well, I can't actually do it while it's rendering. Why don't you lie down so we can cuddle? 6 viewers plus Luna and Essie cats threatening the chat with walking on the keyboard. So I take it your cuddle comment is probably aimed at the cats. Let's go here, and as you can see, it's too saturated now, which is great, because the whole point, what we wanted to do is not have to add these extra color correctors. Okay. There, that looks pretty good. Oh no! What in the world? Why? Okay, guys, I'm getting mystified here. Okay, I know what's going on. I know what's going on. This is not rendering enough frames. It must be. Gosh, this is actually becoming... This is one of those 80-20 scenes where this one shot's going to take as long as everything else I've done today. Okay, when we look at it here, we're not seeing that problem. So my guess is we just need to render more frames, because there's some legacy frames that are not getting rendered over, is what I'm thinking is going on here. So let's just change the length of the clip to 40 and hope, let's hope that things start. Wait a second, stop, Control R. Look at that, it did not update this. You stupid thing, what is wrong with you? You evil twin. Krita, the evil twin. Yeah, that's actually a little disturbing too. So I changed the length of the sequence, but it didn't update that in the render settings. So you could look at that as a plus or a minus. You say, well, I don't know, Dave, you might want to render some range of the animation that isn't the same as the actual playback range. So I can see that point. That's true. That could be a thing. Well, let's see if we still have disasters in the offing. And we don't. Everything's working now. Cool beans. So we got it. And with the background defocus like that, it actually works pretty well. It's also kind of cool and cinematic that when you switch to a wide shot, the background should not be defocused. So that's actually what would happen with real camera lenses. If you were shooting, he's being shot right there with about a 50mm lens if you're using a crop frame camera. If you were using a full frame camera, that would be like a 35mm lens, probably. There, you're probably looking at like a 24, or on a crop frame, you're probably looking at about a 16mm lens, probably. Maybe not. That's actually probably more like a 20 to 24 on a crop frame, come to think of it. So, anywho, you have utmost unsarcastic faith in you getting it right. Well, I feel like I kind of got it. So now the only thing here is we do have a color correction here. It's a secondary color corrector. Oh yes, look at that. I punched up Mel's. The problem is we need a regular color corrector. I mean, if we're going to do it with color correction, we can do that. I mean, that's fine. It just depends on what you want to do. So I would say to sit nicely in the mix, as we like to say, with the prior shot, that's pretty close. Little bit more crunch on the gamma. That's pretty good. This, you know, when you edit a movie, this is a lot of the job. I mean, you'd be amazed how much time. This is where a lot of the time goes, is in color matching. You know, you're cutting from one shot to another. It's worse with live action because you've got less control. over the color, especially when you switch from well, in this case, if this was a real live action situation, we've changed lenses. We've changed, probably changed the positioning of the camera. And normally if you're pointing the camera in the same direction and all it is a lens change, you're not really going to have a big lighting change. So it's debatable whether this would be that big of a deal from the standpoint of color. But yeah, I mean, it becomes quite a job. You're constantly doing this, looking at one shot to the next, just saying, does it feel like it? Does it feel like the same shot? Does it match? So anyway, it's just what we do. And then this shot is obviously hopelessly different. Now what can happen, I tell you the truth, what can definitely happen here is you wind up, like, let's say you're making subtractive changes. So here you got this shot, and then on this one you darken things a little bit. Now you're not matching from here to here, and you're not matching from here to here. You're matching from here to here, which means that what can happen is over time your shot slowly gets darker and darker, right? I mean, that's a real serious thing that is easy to have happen with film work. So now when I'm kicking up the saturation here, I'm also looking over here at the meter, because if you look at this meter up in the corner, you'll see that if I really crank the saturation, we're getting into some, well, actually with this shot we're not getting into any particular danger zones. These little tiny, it's probably hard to see, but these little ranges, like for the yellow channel, if you get into this range here that I'm circling with my mouse, or the green channel here, or the one that usually will get you bad is the red. If the red extends into this box right here, if it were to show on broadcast television, the color would actually blow out. It would actually not be, you wouldn't, analog broadcast systems are not able to reproduce that color. Oh, it's a whole science. Color correction and color standards are a nightmarish bit, I tell you. But Asher is kind of hidden under this tent canopy. So let's go to the big screen. I'll put it on the big screen. You can see the difference. The difference between color corrected and not. That's before I color corrected it. Okay, so now do you think I'm going to wind up going through my show and probably color correcting every shot? You betcha. I've never done a movie where I didn't have to go through. Sometimes you can do it on a track-by-track basis, where you wind up with 20 tracks or something, and you sort of lump together all the shots that need the same color correction so you can correct at the track level. What's a little disturbing here is we do have one. Okay, so this is just a quick blur. So that's kind of interesting, because if we go to the preview, look at this. This is something we could debate about. But let's go to a full range, or a full resolution preview, okay? That's what we actually produced. Now that's pretty sharp. It looks good. The show, though, actually has a quick blur on the whole show. If I turn that off, it's hard to see, but it's a very, very, very subtle change from that to that. To that, to that. What I'm saying is this entire show, the whole show, has a very, very, very subtle blur applied to it. Because the more I studied anime, I found that because a lot of anime up until recent history was not actually produced at full HD. It was produced at like 960 pixels wide or something. And so that means you're just going to have a natural blur in your shows. You just are. And so if you want to have it sort of, as I say, sit in the mix with conventional anime, well, you probably need to apply a little. You don't want it to actually be too sharp. And of course, that's a risk you always run with vector formats like Flash, is they're inherently sharp. Crisp as can be, So this shot, as long as we're doing this, let's just take a look. This shot clearly it looks pasty. It's got a secondary color correction. Okay, look at what I did. I punched him up punched up the saturation on his skin, as far as I'm concerned, too much. What I want to do is pull it back a little bit and then add a standard color corrector like I did on the last shot that just corrects the gamma of the whole shot, not just his skin. Something like that. Now, arguably, this shot should probably have the background defocused again. So now I want to see if there's, I'm watching to see if there's a progression over time where the whole shot, the whole show is getting darker and darker and darker, because it's such an easy thing to do when you're dealing with color correction. And this shot will throw you, because if I try to match that, I'm going to be a little remiss. I'm kind of doing okay. I still think he's a little pasty, though. What happens if we kick up the saturation overall, but drop off? Yeah, wow. So yeah, if we actually got the skin up to where it needed to be with the standard color correction, all the green of the grass and everything's going to be like totally out of control. So we really do need both. Or I've got to fix his skin in Krita, which is probably what I'm going to wind up doing. So frankly, this shot probably should be more like that. I'm just trying to get the low end, you know, the darks where they need to be. So this is an ongoing quest. And then this shot completely needs to be redone because Luka doesn't even look like Luka. So we're almost done, though. I mean, honestly, we are at the point where there are not that many shots to fix. And I am liking what I'm seeing. Let me switch this back to auto. And then so we can kind of see what we're working with. So when I talk about the brightness, I'm also looking at these meters over here. Like, what's the highest hot brights? You know, and is it jumping around a lot from shot to shot? It's actually not. It's pretty consistent. Like, the highest highs are basically right at about 100, which is pretty much where you want them to be. That's why there's a darker, again, you guys probably can't see it, but there's a darker line on the number 100 because, you know, just because that's kind of a convention that you really wouldn't want to go too much hotter than that. Now, if you watch a movie like The Matrix and were to analyze the color, you would find not only is everything tinted green, which obviously it is, but also the brightest brights in a movie like The Matrix probably only come up to about 80. You're not going to be blown out to full brightness very often. It's a more limited dynamic range on the color. So, but this shot is horrible. So this shot, I'm going to skip that shot. I don't even want to show it. It's so bad. But if the work from the last couple days is correct, then it turns out that I may actually be done other than this really awful shot of Luka. I am. It looks like I am. All I got to do is fix this one really bad shot of Luka, and then boom, baby, I'm going to be able to do music and voices and actually release this second webisode. So that would be cool.
We're getting close, friends. I tell you, we're getting close. Every day that we get closer, it becomes so exciting. Until Boulder comes around and starts speaking in his Cockney voice and telling us where it's at. We don't like that, do we? And we don't. Oh, it's fun. When I get up in the morning, I probably drive people crazy because I get up in the morning. The first thing I do is start making voice. I talk to myself. That's what I do. Talk to myself.
What are you talking about, man? You saying you walk around the house in the morning while you're making your coffee? You talk to yourself? What the hell is that? What are you doing? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I do. I entertain myself. Okay, so let's jump back to Krita here. It looks like we need to load these really embarrassing shots of Luka, and frankly, I was watching an English Technicolor movie this morning on TCM, and the color there looked almost like paintings. Right, and I assume you're not talking about a movie that's colorized, but basically what you had with Technicolor was what's called the 3-strip process. So the cameras weighed about 300 pounds. They were massive. And what they had to do, think of it this way, Maria, because color is subtractive, okay? So if you want to capture the greens, what would you do? Let's say you have black and white film. Think about it this way. You've got black and white film, but you want to capture the greens. What would you do? Well, you'd put a red filter, a transparent red filter, and a blue filter, both over top of your lens, so that your lens only picks up the green light, but it's being printed to a black and white film. Now, this isn't exactly how the Technicolor 3-strip process worked, but I think it's probably what they actually did, and it's the reason why you get this incredible enhancement of, say, the blues and greens, and you don't see a lot of yellow. Okay, so I suspect what they did with Technicolor, was they probably, in the 3-color process, I would bet you that they didn't do red, green, blue. Okay? What they probably did was red and green, and then the 3rd strip in the 3-strip process was probably just for contrast. It was probably black and white. And then when you add, so in the red, if you want to capture the reds, you've got to filter out green and blue. And if you want to capture the greens, you got to filter out red and blue. So I'm sure that's not quite how it worked. If you were going to capture blue, obviously you're going to filter out red and green. So if you've got filters, let's just say that's what you did. Well, okay, you've got filters over your lenses. You're printing to black and white film, but that means that you really have to have a lot of light. If you don't crank the lights up like insane, you're not going to get enough light going through those filters to get the print on the film of the color that you need. Well, what's one of the key characteristics of all those old Technicolor movies? The lighting's amazing. Well, that's partly because you want to have good lighting. But it's also partly because they had to turn on one heck of a lot of light just to get a good exposure on that film. Now, if you're outside shooting Gone with the Wind, the sun gives you plenty of light. You're never going to go wrong with the sun. But, yeah, I mean, Technicolor is gorgeous, and it's surprisingly difficult to duplicate the effect digitally. I found it surprisingly difficult to sort of match the aesthetic of Technicolor. It's absolutely beautiful. So anyway, all right, let's save our work. And I hate to do it, but by gum, I'm going to load up this Luka shot, which is 134, and I know this is going to be so embarrassing. But what I might be able to do here is I might be able to pull up some proper... I mean, I did this shot a long time ago, and oh my gosh. I mean, look how stupid Luka looks. I mean, not only is he... And Monkey doesn't look right either. They look stupid. Okay? Okay. This is a little humiliating. Okay. But I will suffer it. I deserve it. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. So this is Luka's chuckling, and Mel says, "Yuck it up, kid," as he goes to grab the bowl. The broken pot, I should say. Okay. So what are we going to do here? Oh my gosh. Okay, so Luka's body... Man, this is so bad. This is actually quite embarrassing. And then we got Monkey. I'm going to say we really need to just redo this shot. Potentially, maybe we could do something with the background. But I think in order to not go insane and also have some fun, I think I'm just going to jump over to Tahoma and think about redoing this shot completely. Because we can always cut pieces of it. Like the bowl, for example. The bowl looks fine. It's a little bit distorted, but whoop-de-doo, Now it looks to me like the bowl's actually baked into the background, so that's unfortunate. But let's just rethink this shot a little bit. Okay? Now, before we do that, though, it would probably be prudent. Boy, you guys are getting the real. This is the stuff. This is behind the curtain stuff you did not want to see. This is where it gets ugly, friends. Okay, so if we come back over here, this shot probably cleaves a little closer to what we want to be thinking about. But here's what I'm thinking. It's 8 o'clock. I think I'm going to just do a little bit of sketching here, and then I'll probably go ahead and wrap it up. But okay, so one thing to notice here, I think, yes, I made a couple changes to my basic pencil test to ink palette. In that, I took the pencil test and set its opacity down to 102. I mean, it could have been 100, but basically less than halfway, so that the sketch is lighter on the screen. And then the ink, I also added smoothing. So if we go down here, I showed this earlier today, but the slow position tracking, I set it to 10. What that means is that if I do my pencil test sketch, it's going to be lighter because it's partially transparent. I set the alpha to it comes out to about 40%. Okay, so I'm going to sketch this since I'm drawing Luka's head, and I feel like I think I kind of got it. So okay, so then when we switch to the ink, you'll see that it drags behind just a little bit, but that setting the slow position tracking to 10 is really quite nice for getting nice curves. Having control over your lines. Definitely helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and I better switch back to my sketch and get the basic anatomy right. And come to think of it, now that I see it, I think maybe I didn't quite get that high enough. So if we're going to go anime style, we probably should do his eyes like this. That's pretty good. That's going to be shot number, what was that? What was that, my friends? My friends. Anybody remember the shot number? Nobody remembers the shot number. It was 134. Okay. Okay. I've started to study more about color. Very valuable. There are so many things about color that most people just don't understand. You start doing color correction, you learn a lot. You learn a lot, my friends. You learn a lot. Okay, Control-Shift-F. Alright, so just to be safe, let's switch to our sketchy brush and let's get rid of these lines and make sure, yep, that's all fillable, so we're in good shape. B key. Okay, so this is what I like about the eraser in selective mode, is I can just sketch over it. If I'm not sure about my drawing, I can always just kind of map out the 3D geometry of, the contours and really just check myself. It's quite useful. I mean, there is a problem on the hat. Frankly, the top of the hat should be chopped off here a little bit. But that's one of those things that it's like, it's a cartoon. The buildings are kind of cockeyed in the background. That's part of the fun of it, if you will. Now, if I do this correctly, I'll be able to probably animate him with the plastic tool. So let's just see what we can get away with here. So I want to put his shoulders in sort of a mid position so that they could be animated up and down. But the likelihood is we're going to want to put his head you know what we're probably going to want to do. I don't want to do it now because, well, actually, here's what I could do. I'm going to select his head. This might look bizarre, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control C, Control V, and make a copy of his head over here. And the reason I'm doing that is because later I don't want to separate the head from the body because it makes it too hard to get the anatomy right drawing it, okay? But having the head over here, once I get the body in place and looking the way I want it to, it's probably going to be, what I'm going to want to do is apply the plastic tool. I'm going to want to take the head and leave the head over here, get everything colored in, erase this head, so the body and the head are separate. And then use the plastic tool so that I can use the plastic tool to deform his shoulders into sort of a shrugging, laughing motion. But the head is just going to be controlled by 2 bones of the plastic tool, and they'll just be animated. And then remember, with the plastic tool, we can set the Z ordering so that the clothing, you know, covers up a little bit of his head. So then the head will never get distorted. It'll just get animated by a couple bones. That's what I'm thinking would be the correct strategy for this particular shot. This is getting into some hairy use of the plastic tool that most people never get into. So if you want to see what the heck I'm talking about, I'll show you here in half a second just to demonstrate it, and then I'll probably wrap it up for the night because I am kind of getting sick of it. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, so what we would do is let's go ahead and get this inked real quick, and then we'll cut the head out. Actually, that's not quite right. That's a little too much collar. Okay, you can see how that slow position tracking is helping me here. It really gives you, it's setting it to 10 is really about right, I tell you. It's a really good, it's not too much smoothing, so it doesn't really slow you down when you're moving your pen, but it definitely smooths the lines and gives you a lot more control over your ink. Okay, so now, okay, we're going to make a creative decision here that's actually based on expediency. What we want to do is let me think about this for a second. You know what? I'm going to do this the simplest possible way because this could get really hairy quick. So I am going to go ahead and go like this and just close this shape. Okay? So what we're actually going to do, unfortunately I have to erase the line I just drew, but what we're going to do is we're just going to put the body and the head separate. Okay? So here's why. And I'm going to demonstrate this really quick, and then I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. So what you do is you say, okay, let's keep this simple. So I can, okay, well I guess I need to check my fill check. So B key. Okay. So now what we'll do is I'll just do a quick and dirty fill so you can see what's going on. Fill this and fill this. I won't worry about his hat for now. We'll just make it some random color because we can always change it to red later, right? Like that. Okay, so what I was talking about is if I hit the X key, and I better save this. This is shot 134, so let's save this. File, save all, and we'll call this 134. Okay? Good. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. Take the plastic tool, create the mesh, boom, and when you build the skeleton, what you're going to do is you're going to first of all, make sure you put nodes everywhere that you want to protect so it doesn't get deformed. So I'm going to put like a set of 3 nodes here so I can distort. I'll be able to animate his shoulders up and down. Okay. I'll also be able to maybe animate this region down a little bit when he laughs, when his head comes down. But then here's the other thing though. what we want to do is actually create a completely separate set of nodes for his head. I'm going to guess probably like that. Okay? So then when we go into animate mode, we'll turn off keep distance. And what we'll be able to do is actually move his head into position like this. And because this has 2 nodes on it, we can get a rotation on his head this way, and we can also get a bouncing up and down this way. Okay? And then meanwhile, we also can do this with his shoulders, see? So now that gives us total control with no chance of accidentally distorting his head. The key to the whole game is you actually cut your character into pieces, and then on frame 1 you move the pieces back together again. Get it? Simple. It's a great technique. And just for the record, you could take, see, look at all the control we have here. Look at that. I mean, it's incredible. This is perfect. All right, and one of the things you can do also is you can set the Z ordering. So here, this node that represents his head, watch this. If we go into, I think it's SO stands for stacking order. So if I changed this to -1, see how it goes behind? So I set it back to 0, and it's going to be whatever the default stacking order is. Okay, well, it looks like it needs to be 1, actually. Okay, and by the way, just so you know, that's animatable. You can animate the stacking order too. So with that, I'm going to quit. I'm actually going to wrap this up here in a quick hurry. And you guys, there will be more tomorrow because I need to get this shot done. All right, so have a good night, and there will be more.